Hello everybody, I am finally back to making YouTube videos. Sorry again for the delay because this semester has been so heavy on me with exams, and I'm just really excited to be back here doing this movie review. And I finally got this new Spider-Man t-shirt from my Spider-Man 2 Connecting with Christ with a Superhero video. So I guess let's get on to the review of what I'm going to review today. As some of y'all may know me, I love Spider-Man. I have reviewed the first two movies from the Sam Raimi trilogy. I really love Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, and I also like Tom Holland as our new Spider-Man with his new movie, Spider-Man Homecoming, and his new upcoming movie, Spider-Man Far From Home. But there's this movie that kinda made me really interested about how did this franchise have this interesting movie that has been either hated by or praised by, because since its release in 2007, there's been a lot of mixed arguments about whether this is a good or a bad film. But I'm really willing to review it today, and I'm excited, and that movie just has to be Spider-Man 3. And we all know that Spider-Man 3 is very famous for that meme, Emo Peter. So, I guess let's just go on to the review. Spider-Man 3 is a 2007 superhero movie directed by Sam Raimi, and it's a sequel off of the first two Spider-Man movies in the Spider-Man trilogy by Sam Raimi, with Spider-Man 1 in 2002, Spider-Man 2 in 2004, and with this third installment in 2007, and it stars the usual cast such as Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, J.K. Simmons, and it also has Thomas Haden Church, Topher Grace, and so many others. And this movie is about Peter Parker and his relationship with his friends, with Mary Jane and Harry. And basically in this movie, life is going very well for Peter. New York City is loving Spider-Man until Peter Parker realizes that there is this thing called the symbiote that transforms him into this different type of person. He eventually becomes even more evil when he has this new symbiote attract to his suit and taking over his entire personality and ruining his relationships. And then he also realizes that Uncle Ben's killer is actually the Sandman. And Sandman is someone who is an escaped convict named Flint Marko. And I think I'm probably just going to leave the movie there to avoid spoilers. Now, 12 years have passed. What do I think about Spider-Man 3? Well, I like it. I think it's a fine movie. It does have some awesome things, but at the same time, it does have some disappointing things, and we're definitely going to talk about that. I do not consider this movie to be any masterpiece, but it's a movie that I still have tons of fun watching, even if the film does get kind of stupid from time to time. Let me start off with the positives, and the positive is that I think everyone does a great job in this movie. Yes, even Tobey Maguire, even if he did get emo. But the thing is that I still appreciate Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. I still enjoyed his performance, even if it did get really silly at the times when he becomes the bad Spider-Man. But I feel like in the scenes where he's Peter Parker, you can tell he's Peter Parker. He's definitely Peter Parker. He acts like him, he talks like him, and he still has that geekiness. But the thing that kind of makes Peter Parker a bit more different than the first two is that not only is his character more experienced, but he does get a little annoying sometimes. And I think it's kind of like an okay setup, because it also shows about the setup of how Peter may be even more annoying when he gets a black suit, which I thought was pretty good. And I also loved Kirsten Dunst in this movie because I really enjoyed what she was able to do more as Mary Jane. And I also love James Franco as Harry Osborn. He delivers a great performance, even if there was not so much for him to do within the second half of the movie. But I still think it's pretty good, especially with Rosemary Harris as Aunt May. Aunt May is just fantastic.
Spider-Man? I don't understand. Spider-Man doesn't kill people. What happened?
And I also love J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. He is always J. Jonah Jameson no matter what. If they make like a future Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland, they really need to bring back J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson if the new Peter Parker gets hired by the Daily Bugle. And of course, I also love Bruce Campbell's third cameo. He does a very fantastic job as this French guy in a restaurant, and he's absolutely hilarious in that scene. The other thing I really enjoyed about Spider-Man 3 is the action, and as much as I really love the train fight scene from Spider-Man 2, that's still probably the best Spider-Man fight I've ever seen. You can tell that in Spider-Man 3, they really stylize the fights even more. There's more choreography, there's even more action, and I really love about the way of how they handle the camera in fight-to-fight scenes, especially like in one scene where Peter and Harry fight. And there are some other cool fights, you know, like Spider-Man versus Sandman or Spider-Man versus Venom, and I thought they were handled well. They were still very entertaining to watch, which is why I still have a lot of fun watching it.
Everything!
Even if Spider-Man 3 has a lot of stylistic action, some good acting, and even some funny humor, unfortunately this movie does suffer from a lot of problems, and that is from the script. The script has an over-bloated amount of scenes that just follow one after from the other, and they switch tones because Spider-Man 3 just has a lot of weird tones going for it. Like, you can have one scene that's really silly, and then you can follow another scene that just has a lot of weird things going on. And then you just have this other scene that's supposed to be very serious, and although the serious tones work for that scene, it just feels so awkward when you have like a silly scene before it or after it, and that was one of the biggest issues with Spider-Man 3. Unfortunately, the movie also has an overbloated amount of characters. Now, I really love the scenes when it's between Peter, MJ, and Harry, as well as Aunt May, because they do continue the story about how they were after Spider-Man 2. But when the film decides to add characters like Eddie Brock and Gwen Stacy and then Sandman, the film does feel a bit cluttered. Like, it tends to lose focus on what's going on, and then you have these other characters that just appear and go like, hey, I'm Eddie Brock, I work for the Daily Bugle, and then you also have, oh, hi, I'm Gwen Stacy. Now, I like these characters, I think they were fine, but just the addition of them kind of ruined the concentration of what the story between, what was going on between, you know, Peter and everyone else. It's not confusing from the way that they made it, because I know with movies that have so many subplots inserted into them, they can get pretty confusing. You can understand what's going on in Spider-Man 3, but based on the runtime and like how many events happen from one another, it just goes like, oh, okay, how come we're going to this scene? I was really interested into this story, but how come we're introduced to this other story? And that was what Spider-Man 3 suffered from in terms of narrative. And, drum roll please, I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate from this, but I actually enjoy Emo Peter. Now, do I think it's stupid? Oh, absolutely. I think it's really dumb. But from the way of how famous Emo Peter has become with, like, internet memes and, you know, the way of how they like to make fun of Tobey Maguire, you know, dancing, I feel like it's kind of like a pop culture reference from now on, from 2007, when those scenes happened. And I honestly wish that Peter Parker would be even more darker with the way of how the symbiote got him. But, I mean, it's just hilarious. I mean, you just have to laugh at Emo Peter, especially when he does those weird things, you know, walking the streets in New York thinking that he's cool. Oh, that walk. I still laugh at it. I'm not ashamed. I still laugh at that walk. As much as I stated all the negatives and the positives of Spider-Man 3, it's still a film I enjoy. Now, it's also a movie I feel really bad for because Sam Raimi had a different vision for Spider-Man 3. There were a lot of things that he wanted to do, but unfortunately from what I've researched, he had a lot of troubles with studio interference from Sony, and Sony really pressured him to cram all of these characters in. So although the script does have a lot of problems, Sam Raimi was just really pressured, and I know he could have done a lot of better things with the things that he was given, but at least the guy tried. You know, this is still a film that it's made, and there is still effort, even if some of the things did not work out, but at least it's a film that I was entertained by, and I'm glad that I was entertained by. But it's also that movie that you kind of have to watch more than once if you can tolerate it. If you hated this movie, that's totally okay. I respect your opinion. But for some people that I've talked to or who are friends of mine, they told me that, yeah, I hated Spider-Man 3 the first time I saw it, but when they watched it more and more, they kind of analyzed it. And this is a movie that when you rewatch it, yes, you can laugh at it, but it has some good and bad into it, as I've stated earlier in this video. And it's also a movie that you can kind of find some really good messages about life, kind of like the first two movies. Like, this movie does deal with, like, forgiveness and the dangers of pride and the abuse of your powers. And it also made me think about maybe I can do maybe a video analysis of Spider-Man 3 sometime. But nevertheless, this movie is definitely okay. It's not as great as Spider-Man 1, and definitely not as wonderful as Spider-Man 2. It's a disappointment, but I don't think it's terrible as what people say. I mean, that's just my opinion. Like what I said, if you did not like it, that's okay. But for me, Spider-Man 3 gets probably a 6.7 or 8 out of 10, my grade.